hate to break it to you, but if you've been on the fence over whether to buy a new iPhone in recent years, this one might push you over the edge. This is the new iPhone 13. I'm Lauren Goode for Wired, and I'm going to break down this new phone for you. So far, I think the iPhone 13 is going to be a pretty popular upgrade phone. And studies are showing that people are holding onto their phones for longer and longer, in some cases as long as 3 or 4 years, which, by the way, I think is a good thing. If you can hold on to it for longer, great. But if you are one of those people who have been holding onto your phone for a while, and you've been following trends like the emergence of 5G and these crazy good smartphone cameras, then this might be the year you're considering an upgrade. The iPhone 13 looks pretty much like the iPhone 12. Not a lot of differences there. You'll notice a bigger difference between something like the iPhone 13 and the iPhone 11, which already feels a little bit outdated in its design. There are some tiny differences between the builds on the iPhone 13 and the iPhone 12. The first is the cutout in front is smaller on the iPhone 13. It's not quite a hole punch cutout that we're starting to see on some phones like Samsung phones, but it is smaller, so that's notable. You'll also notice if you look on the side of the phone that the buttons on the iPhone 13 are placed a little bit lower than on the iPhone 12. And then on the back, on the camera module, where they're stacked on top of one another on the iPhone 12, they're in a diagonal on the iPhone 13. And Apple has basically said this is because they re-engineered a lot of the guts of the phone, the internal components. And so as part of that, they had to shift some things around on the exterior. The iPhone 13 also ships with 128 gigabytes of internal storage, which is double the amount of storage that was in the base model of last year's iPhone 12. And this is obviously a good thing. It is the year 2021, and smartphones should not be shipping with just 64 gigabytes of internal storage. The iPhone 13 has an updated processor. Apple is calling this its A15 Bionic chip, which is supposed to signal how fast it is. It is going to be a faster processor than the chip that was in last year's iPhone 12. These things pretty much are happening sequentially now. The iPhone 13 starts at $799 and goes up to $1099 for the model with the most storage. I should note though that this year there are a lot of different subsidies out there from wireless carriers and other retailers. So if you have a relatively new iPhone, you might get a decent trade-in deal and not have to pay as much. That's right, we're back to subsidies. Another thing you're gonna get with this phone is a bigger battery. It's not only a physically bigger battery than the one in the iPhone 12, but it's supposed to be longer lasting because of the updated processor. Now, I haven't been able to run down the battery day after day after day like I would like to do when I'm testing phones because I just haven't had it for as much time yet. But here's an example so far of its pretty good battery life. Yesterday morning, I woke up, I charged the phone to 100% by 10 a.m., then I took it off its charger, I went about my day, I was streaming media, streaming music, watching videos, creating videos. And when I woke up this morning, I still had about 40% battery life left. So that's pretty good, and I'm gonna be curious to see how well it performs over time. So how good is the camera on the iPhone 13? Everyone always wants to know about the cameras. I would say they're really good, and the cameras on the iPhone 13 Pro are gonna be really, really good. Now, if you have last year's iPhone 12, you're probably pretty happy with the camera, and I would say that you're not in like an absolutely need to upgrade situation just for the cameras. A few things about the camera that stand out to me in particular. The first, there's this feature called cinematic video. This is not going to be the highest resolution video. When you go into cinematic video mode, Apple automatically sort of downgrades it to 1080p at 30 frames per second, so you're not going to be able to shoot 4K video. But what it does is it kind of applies this rack focus effect while you're shooting video. You can also adjust it after the fact in post. It basically means like you can shift the focus or the focal point of what you're shooting as you're shooting it. So if there are two objects or two people in the frame and you kind of want the focus to shift and have that nice blurred background while you're shooting, maybe for dramatic effect, this phone will do it for you, which is pretty cool. It also works in selfie mode. Another test of cinematic mode. So right now I'm in focus. and focus. The second camera feature that has stood out to me is something called photographic styles. There are 4 of them in addition to standard mode as you're shooting photos. These are kind of like filters, but Apple insists they're different from filters because when you apply a filter to a still photo, sometimes there's a pop or a highlight or things look kind of unnatural. Whereas this photographic style applies to the whole image and is supposed to keep skin tones truer to accuracy. That's something I haven't really felt like I'll use all that much. I'll probably mostly shoot photos in standard mode, but it's a nice to have kind of thing. And then the last thing that stands out to me so far is really just the low light settings. The other night I was out for a walk with a friend on the streets of San Francisco. It was getting dark. I took photos of her with the iPhone 11, the iPhone 12, and the new iPhone 13. And I mean, just the low light capture was remarkably better. So as Apple has created more of these different product categories for its phones over the years, right? The Pro and the Pro Max versus the basic or normie model, it has gone to great lengths to differentiate between the two. And we've certainly seen some sacrifices in the design and build of phones like the iPhone XR and the iPhone 11 that I've been carrying around every day. But in this case, it doesn't feel like there are a ton of sacrifices. I mean, this is a really nice phone with a really nice build and a nice display. It's got a powerful chip. I mean, yeah, the chip's slightly less powerful than the one that's in the Pro model, but it's still pretty darn good. I think that if you've been thinking about upgrading and you're not interested in getting the Pro or like a giant brick of a phone, the iPhone 13 might be the way to go.